Hello everybody, welcome to a star rating video, but not a star rating video the likes that most of my people will have seen. Classically, I've done Hearthstone videos with star ratings for the cards that are coming out from, the set, the mini set, and actually to do with that, I probably will do something with the core set rotation going forwards. I've never done one for Overwatch because I've never had a reason to do one for Overwatch. Until now, with the release of Perks, I think we get the closest thing you could possibly have in Overwatch of having this deck builder-like mechanic in the game. Over the course of a game, you'll be able to pick perks, which is like putting cards into your deck, and you'll put certain perks into your deck, depending on which ones you think are optimal for certain situations. So I was like, I have to do a star rating video for this. I will concede, this is probably going to be quite a long video. You'll be able to tell already that it's a long video, so apologies if it isn't quite as crisp as some of the other ones, because I'll let you know, I've been writing notes on this stuff, and I've gone into maybe 8 or 9 A4 back-to-back pages, so I wrote quite a lot of stuff down. I'm going to forget things. I apologize, but I'm trying to make this as good as possible, and here I am. Also, I have to make it like as timely as possible since the perks come out on Tuesday, and I wanted to do this before the perks came out so that everyone would have a chance 2 or 3 weeks down the line when, the meta starts to settle down again, that everyone could come into this video, see that I've rated something a 1-star when it's actually a 5-star, and they can all laugh at me. So that's what I wanted to make sure I could do, so I'm a bit tight for time. I'm also going to do a few other different things. Firstly, I'm going to give a star rating based on the quality of the perk. And by this, I mean, actually, we'll get to this in a moment. I'm going to give a quality rating, which is quite close to the Hearthstone rating. Then I'm also going to give a design rating, which I don't normally do on Hearthstone cards, but I'm going to do for the Overwatch perks, because they are just a new gimmick, really. And by these things, I really mean the quality of something is, how good do I think a perk is going to be within the context of a hero's viability at a competitive level? You could have a perk, which I think is a poor design choice, for example, that is extremely good quality. Conversely, you could have a really good designed perk, but it could be completely garbage. I'd say the comparable thing again if you want to look at Hearthstone or any other competitive game. You might see a card and go like, holy shit, this card would be really good in this deck. But because it only works in this deck, and this deck isn't actually that good, the whole package won't work together. Like, it's just its own... It's like a big fish in a small pond, right? And you can't make an aquarium out of that, right? Wait, does the analogy still work? I don't know. Either way, that's kind of the analogy I'm going for. On the design point, this is where things get a bit more opinionated, and I will just be clear with this. This is what I think a perk should be in the game. This is before we've even really seen the perk system, but in my opinion, a perk should be something that is situationally beneficial. And this is quite a broad term when you really get to think about it. I talk here about, like, there's going to be different scenarios in the game state, but don't just think that it's, like, oh, if my opponent is playing this, then I take this perk. It's not just your opponent's playing style, it's your own team's play style as well. So if your team's playing dive, you might want to take a perk which is going to complement your other heroes on your team. Conversely, again, maybe you do want to counter what your opponent's team is doing. You might take a perk to survive your opponent's team's dives, for example, or their rushes. Also, I want it to be dependent on the map geometry and potentially even the game mode. There are some perks which may be more beneficial for certain game modes than others. Either way, I don't want a situation where the perk is like, you just take this perk because this is the good one. The other thing I'd be quite happy on a perk is, even if it doesn't like situationally depend on the global environment of the game state, if it complements a certain playstyle of that hero, then I can kind of forgive a little bit that, potentially it's a bit of a... I sometimes call it like a bit of a boring choice, so to speak. It's not really changing how you would play the hero that much, but it pushes it in one direction of a preference of the way to do the hero. That might not be great explanations. Maybe it's actually better if I explain what I think a bad one is, because it's not good enough for me just saying what I think a good one is. I'm going to say also what I think the bad ones are. I think a quirk is bad if it just adds value onto the hero and does absolutely nothing to do with how you would change that hero, how you would play it, the playstyles of your matchups versus other heroes. If it's just a raw buff and does nothing else on top of it, I think that's a really bad design choice, because you might as well just put that into the base hero anyway. Why put it into the perk system? You might as well just put it on the base hero instead. And the other reason is obviously if there is absolutely no reason to take it, if the perk is so abysmally bad, you would never take it. So I normally knock design points off for that. The final thing I'm going to mention is I'm actually going to give a third rating, which isn't going to be a star rating, because otherwise I'd have a galaxy on my screen at all times. I'm just going to give it A, B, C, D, or E mark. And this mark is basically just going to be how I think the package is all together. Because the design and quality scores are taking these perks in a vacuum and saying like, oh, this individually is pretty good. The mark will be how does the package work together. And I will actually knock off marks for things like, if only perk A from minor and perk B from major are viable, that's obviously not a great design because you just pick those two irrespective of what else is happening in the game. I want you to have some like fluid choices. I want decision making to actually matter. I want it to increase the skill of the game. Otherwise, it's kind of brain dead, no? Alright, let's get down to business then. We have many heroes to get through. I'll also mention right now, I'm not going to do the new hero. She did have some perks revealed on the streamer early access games, but they weren't in a final state, I believe, so I'm just not going to bother with the new hero. So it's just heroes that are in the roster, and this is just going to be the perks that we're going to see on Tuesday. We have, starting with Doomfist in the tank role. I'm going to go from tanks to DPS to supports, by the way. So every hero has 2 minor and 2 major perks, in case you've not seen this. The minor perks... Oh, I actually forgot to mention one other thing, because it wasn't on that slide. I will forgive poor design on the minor perks versus the major perks for the sake of the rating. So if you've got really good major perks, but the minor perks are, I think, are a bit like poorly designed, I'll just forgive that, because the major perks I think are the more important ones. They are the ones that are designed to drastically alter the game. And I think if they're drastically altering the game in such a way that it's an important choice to make it, and you could pick one or the other, I think that's a really good design philosophy. So I'm just letting you know this in advance. Anyway, the 2 minor perks on Doomfist, you have 1-2, hitting an enemy with rocket punch reloads all hand cannon ammo. I think low-key this is getting slept on. It's actually quite an interesting ability. I do think this changes the way you would play Doomfist as a base hero. Just looking at the raw numbers, Doomfist does, I think at maximum, again, this is like a shotgun approach, so it's hard to take these numbers like absolute. I'm looking like somewhat best case scenarios, but his pellets do about 55 damage per shot. He shoots at, he has 4 ammo in his clip and he does 3 shots per second. So over about 1.3 seconds, he's doing about 220 damage. This is not including crits, by the way. So you could actually be doing higher. Also, because it's a shotgun, you could be doing a little bit less depending on the hero you're shooting. But we'll just take 220 as a rough estimate. That's a lot of damage to pump out in 1.3 seconds. Now, normally the weakness of this is when you then try to, punch someone, you don't necessarily have the shot to finish off that target with after that. Now, with this situation, you could just tap punch an opponent, which does about 25 damage. You refill all your ammo, and you can just blast away again. And I think it's a really good strategy if you just wanted to bully an opposing tank. It gives Doomfist some sort of, like, frontline presence. Normally, you'd play this playstyle of, trying to assassinate someone in the backline. However, I feel like when Doomfist has got like some of his best case uses, it's when he comes from unusual angles into a grouped up set of enemies, right? Potentially, now, you could, if you can't get off onto these off angles because you're getting punished by some sort of, CC or something like that, maybe you just punch the opposing tank. You just shoot, tank, punch him, shoot again. That's like 465 damage in about 2 and a bit seconds well, actually it's a bit shy of 3 seconds, so we'll be generous. It's pretty sizable, especially if you start putting crits into that, so I can see this being some sort of tank busting ability. As a result of the potential differences of playstyles here for Doomfist, and he already had a few different ways of playing the game, I've actually put 4 stars in design. Now, I've only put 2 stars in quality because I think if you really wanted to do some sort of tank busting type strategy, or if you wanted a tank that could go mano-a-mano with the opposing tank, there's probably better options than Doomfist. You'd probably be more inclined to swap. But if you're a Doom one-trick, maybe this gives you a little bit of a different thought process into the game. Survival of the Fittest is his other minor perk. The best defense grants 25 overhealth from his eliminations, and its max overhealth is increased by 50. So normally, the Survival of the Fittest, it gives you 40 shields for normal abilities per enemy you hit. Except for your ult where you get 75 instead. So it's basically your way to snowball fights. And again, this gets around to the idea that I think Doomfist is at his strongest when he's slamming into multiple enemies, getting all that shield up, which allows him just to stand fast, basically, and punch them with a full charge punch and hits multiple enemies. That's where it's really scary. And it's like, kind of like brawl. It's like punishing brawls that are on the transition. I think is where Doomfist can do some really, really scary things. Survival of the Fittest is potentially a way to gain a bit more health. However, again, it maybe pushes towards a playstyle of being a bit more of an assassin rather than going for these big clumps of enemies. Maybe just try and knock one guy off, kill him, you get the 25 over health, and then you go on to assassinate another person, and so on and so forth. I actually think where the strongest part of this ability might, in fact, lie is just the increased over health. I believe, let me check my notes here. Do I have it down here? It's capped at 200 normally. Increasing the cap to 50 also rewards you then potentially for going for these big group-like plays. You might not just get the 200 over health anymore. If you get a kill in the process, you can go up to 250. This means you could survive through some additional stuns, maybe even a hack or something where you can't use your power block at that point. So all in all, I think it's actually a pretty solid choice. I think it's a pretty difficult decision between the two of them. I've given this a design of 3 and a quality of 2. I think it's going to be a pretty minor change, but as I said, it is a minor perk, so I'm not expecting great things from it. But I do think it is something that could be noticeable and make a bit of a difference. But the part of the reason why this has only got 3 versus 4 stars, I think it doesn't change the whole Doomfist style too much. You're probably still going to be trying to hit groups of enemy on transitions and then punching them. Now we get to the major perks. We have Seismic Empowerment. Hitting 3 or more enemies with Seismic Slam empowers a rocket punch. Huge. I was just mentioning that I think that this is where Doomfist is at its most powerful. It leans more into that play style and rewards you pretty effectively as well. Because one of the weaknesses, again, of Doomfist is you kind of do your first engage where you try and build up an empowered punch. And if you don't get that empowered punch, you're kind of like bang out of luck. You might have to like reset up again, go from another dive, try and get the empowered punch. It can be really annoying into certain comps, especially into comps that have CC, where if you try and put up your power block, they just break your power block, put you out of it, and then you don't get the empowered punch. Also breaks your movement cycle. It's really obnoxious for Doom to play into those types of heroes. If you can just get it on the Seismic Slam and it's only hitting 3 enemies, it's a really big punishment for any team that wants to play some sort of deathball-y type comp. So again, it's a decision you have to make situation depending on what your opponent's doing and also the playstyle you want to play. So I actually really like the idea of this. As a result, I've given this 4 stars in design and 3 stars in quality overall. Doom's in a bit of a weird place right now in the meta. He doesn't see too much play. He mainly sees play for coming back from, the spawn room to contest a fight. But I tell you what, it's actually going to be pretty spooky if you do swap Doom and you're at, the end of a push map or something, and a Doom flies out with Seismic Empowerment, instantly gets a rocket punch because everyone's on the payload, and it just thumps your entire team. He could pick up some really tricky kills with that. So I actually think this could push Doomfist into, on certain points, in certain circumstances, a viable situation. So I think this is a really strong major for Doom enjoyers. And then finally, we have Power Matrix. Power Block absorbs projectiles for the first second of its duration. So Power Block is the ability that normally, I think it reduces damage you will take by 80%. And depending on the amount of damage you negate, I think right now it's set as 100 damage, but don't quote me on this one, it's not actually in my notes. He gets an Empowered Punch. And the Empowered Punch is like a super duper mega punch, right? That does more damage and does more CC. And it's basically Doomfist's way of killing people. I just mentioned one of the issues with Power Block is you could put the Power Block up and then an Ana can just sleep dart you. Or a Cassidy can, hinder you in some way. They can do some really obnoxious things to Doomfist and just break him out of the Power Block. Now, though, Doomfist has a bit of counterplay, and it's a skilled counterplay. You might not just instantly want to Power Block up. You might want to wait for that animation when Ana pulls out the sleep dart, goes to fire it. Then you put your Matrix up, and it absorbs it. And by absorb, it means you take no damage from it for starters. It 100% absorbs. And you also, I believe, don't take the status effect of that thing. So you can play around things like Sleep Dart. You can play around things like the the flashbangs, it's actually a pretty strong ability, but it's an extremely skill-based ability, so I love the idea of it. Also worth noting, I believe this is the way this is going to work, is for that first 1 second, you're 100% absorbing damage, which means you're getting, like, way more bang for your buck towards your Empowered Punch. It should mean that your Empowered Punch is easy to charge. You might actually just want to power block in front of someone doing a lot of damage, ignore the CC effect of it, but you just get the Empowered Punch more consistently. So I think this is also a really, really strong play. And I think this is a bit of a stronger play for trying to assassinate single enemies off on their own, you know, in the backline or something. So I think this is a pretty cool ability. I think it's got a lot of skill involved. I love it. So I gave this one 5 stars. Again, quality 3. I don't think it pushes Doom into, like, absolute, you know, must-run territory. But I think if you're a Doom enjoyer, then I think they kind of meet your various requirements. If you want to play this assassin playstyle, you can do it. If you want to play this brawler playstyle, you can do it. And if you want to do this, like, more in the middle where you're a bit more of a divey tank one, you can do it. I think a lot of things you can plug and play. I like this kit. I think this is actually one of the strongest perk kits they put out there. So we're starting strong. I'm actually giving this one an A. I don't think there's necessarily some, like, definite, I take this minor over this minor, or this major over this major. I think it is very situational which ones you would pick, and that's what you want to see in the perk, so great start. Now we move over to D.Va. D.Va has, again, the 2 minors and the 2 majors. We'll start with the minors. Bunny Stomp. Core max damage radius is increased by 50%. Really, really memey. It doesn't really change how you play D.Va. It's kind of just going to be something that's really unfun to play against. I sort of don't like it, to be honest with you. Yeah, I guess it somewhat gives people the fuck off if they want to try and kill you in mini D.Va form before you get back into mech. As I'll talk about with the other minor point, I think there is a better way of doing this, though, so I just think this is, like, complete meme potential, and I don't really like it. So I've only given this one design 1. I don't think it's quality 1. I don't think this improves D.Va noticeably. But yeah, enjoy people in your games inting on tank, trying to bunny stomp people in grabs and that type of... Actually, you won't be able to do that for normal competitive. Just trying to bunny stomp people for laughs and giggles. Then she has Ejection Suit. So Eject grants 75 temporary overhealth. This actually does make a bit of a difference. It's kind of like a low-key surprising thing when you really think about it. What this does do is, normally when D.Va uses Ejection Suit, it's because either she's D.Va bombed or she's been demeched. They're like the only 2 ways. If you want to use a D.Va bomb, though, one of the things that you normally struggle with is getting back into the mech again, or it kind of puts you off wanting to do these aggressive D.Va bomb plays because you just get killed before you can get back into the mech again. You have to, like, run back into cover and, like, hide in the corner or something. And if you're picked off on the transition, then it's pretty bad, right? Ejection Suit, the 75 temporary overhealth, means that you're more likely to get back into cover, which means like you could use your ultimate a bit more aggressively. It's not too bad, again, if you get into the situation where you're demech, which is the alternate situation where this kind of minorly helps. It lets you maybe get back to your team again to try and build up the suit so you can get the ult again. So I actually don't hate it. It does give you a little bit of decision-making on your ult. It's really minor, though. That being said, I've given it 3 stars. I'm actually going to... 3 stars design, 4 stars quality. I actually think this is going to be surprisingly actually okay. Maybe I've over-egged the quality a little bit. Maybe it should be 3, but D.Va's in a pretty strong state right now anyway. And I think this just simply improves her further still. Or I say improves. It's just going to increase the amount of times where you use a D.Va bomb to, like, re-mech and then get back into the mech again. And I think that alone is probably good enough. That's kind of why I've got to the quality 4. In terms of majors, we have Shield System. Convert 150 health to shields. Defense Matrix restores shields based on 25% of the damage absorbed. Okay, this is a pretty spooky system. I suspect this is really, really obnoxious to play against, but I've kind of tried to not put my design too much into that merit. It does change D.Va's playstyle, so I don't think it's necessarily a bad design. It makes D.Va more self-sufficient. If you're turning health into shields, shields is just a resource that if you don't take damage for, I think it's about 3 seconds, it regens at 20 health per second back. And this works on a different system to the passive health regeneration, so they both go up at potentially the same time. So if on a tank you're out of battle for, I think it's 5 seconds, then you will get the 20 health per second on shields, and you'll get the It depends on the tank you're playing, but it's 10 plus 5% max health regeneration from the passive healing health regeneration. So it does potentially mean that D.Va can go into fight, D.Va can fly off, and then just stay out of battle for 5 seconds or something. Or even with DM, you might be able to get into a situation where you can just trigger your own passive healing or your own shields healing from the shield system to actually start just healing you through this. So it actually gives us some potential, like, ability to not only just, like, frontline presence, which I think this does give you a bullet frontline presence, but also lets her just go off on her own without, like, some sort of babysitting, and then just sort of recover some health back while she waits for another dive. Obviously, the other big thing about this is you are just restoring your health back equal to the damage absorbed times 0.25. This means that D.Va could just sit in the front line. It's one of the D.Va's weaknesses right now. She doesn't want to sit in this front line battle versus most tanks. She doesn't win it. Now she can sit in the front line a little bit, take a bit of damage, and then she just uses DM to re-heal back all of her health. And then while her DM is, coming back up again, she just tanks it with her body instead until the point of she can use the DM again to restore health. So it kind of makes it a self-fulfilling juggernaut. It's also pretty spooky that it's 150 health that gets converted and no armor. So you're keeping the stuff that damage mitigates, and you're trading for the stuff that doesn't damage mitigate. It's kind of just an overall big buff to D.Va. And D.Va's in a pretty strong state right now, so yeah, this is going to be a really strong major. I've given it Design 3, again Quality 4. D.Va pretty close to being a meta hero. In fact, she's seeing a lot of play in Overwatch Champion Series right now. So yeah, I just think this is going to make D.Va even stronger. And it is situationally good, situationally bad. I still don't think you really want to be frontline against D.Va, but I can forgive the design things a little bit. Heavy rockets is the other major. Micro missiles are swapped for heavy rockets, which fire fewer projectiles with increased damage and explosion size. I'm just going to jump the gun here a bit. We need to fully see the damage on this one to the numbers on this to really figure it out. Again, I've put a 3-star on the design on this one, but 2-star on the rating. I feel like D.Va is always just going to be optimal to play as this assassin style. I feel like this heavy rocket thing maybe leans more into, if you're playing against a team that always clumps together and has shielding, you're going to get more splash damage off the heavy rockets than you would do on the micro missiles normally. So it's more beneficial to take these rockets, but I assume they're going to be slow moving, high damaging, big explosive projectiles, which is kind of what it says on the tin here. In that situation, do you want to really be playing D.Va though, or would you prefer to swap into another brawlier tank? You probably want to swap into another brawlier tank. And I actually think there's just better tanks, even in the dive department, that can cleave through these big bodies grouped together. So it's interesting because it definitely does change the way D.Va would want to play this. It probably takes her away from this assassin playstyle again towards this frontline big mech playstyle, but I just don't think you would ever realistically use this in the game. Overall, I think I've given D.Va a D. Actually, I was pretty mean to D.Va. It should really be a D+, verging on C. I don't know what was happening when I was doing D.Va. I don't know if I was just angry or something, but yeah, that might be a bit of a harsh rating. I think the reason I gave it actually a pretty harsh rating, I think I was going to give it a C, but I sort of demoted a mark because I don't think you would ever take Bunny Stomp. I think you would only take Ejection Suits. And equally, I don't think you would almost ever take Heavy Rockets. I think you would always take Shield System. So because of that, there was really no decision making involved in the skills you're going to pick, in my opinion, for D.Va. You're almost certainly just going to take Ejection Suit, Shield System, and be happy with your lot in life. So yeah, I think that's why I took it down towards D, even though individually each thing is designed quite well. It's where this mark comes into its own. It sort of takes both the quality and the design together, and actually just all of these marks together and bundles it into one quite nice little figure. Now we get to Hazard. Hazard has got off the top on the minor perks. Violent Leap Slash deals 30% more damage to enemies above 250 health. Now, I've got a funny feeling I didn't like this. Let me just get my notes about this. I have some issues about this. On paper, it kind of makes some degree of sense, right? Because if you think about it, most of the squishies in the game are 250 health or less. So contextually, you would just see this as Violent Leap is doing more damage to tanks, which is good because it means that you can frontline trade better with Hazard, which is something he doesn't really want to do too much, especially on the Violent Leap. You really want to be jumping on squishies, slashing them in the face, throwing a wall at the back, and then shooting them in the head, and that one-shots most of the cast. Now, funnily enough, in the last week or so in Overwatch Champion Series, there's been a pivot from a Hazard meta, a very strong Hazard meta, which we had over winter, towards this comp involving Torbjorn and sometimes Symmetra. which counters Hazard comp because Hazard can't really one-shot Torbjorn. He's like one of the few squishies in the roster that can't be one-shot because he has more than 250 health. He also has a button that gives him more armor. And between the more armor and the more health and the fact that Torb's effective range is actually quite close, very comparable to Hazard, but Torb is a little bit better at it. Torb can actually just beat the shit out of Hazard if he ever jumps on him. Also, Hazard's not great at dealing with turrets and that type of thing. And also, while he's blocking, Sim can just build up insane charge. Either way, also, by the way, Sim has more than 250 health as well. So, for these reasons, this is kind of why this comp sort of started to see a bit of play. And it's now sort of like flatlining again as people are running the comp to counter that comp as well now. So, the meta is kind of like not settled right now. And we're going to be even more unsettled on Tuesday, as I said in the previous video. But yeah, getting down to why I don't like this ability that much. And it's kind of what I alluded to. There's a lot of heroes that have 275 health. Cassidy has 275 health, for example, and that's been seeing a little bit of play. Lifeweaver, LOL. May, Torbjorn, and Sim. So they're suddenly going to start taking 30% more damage. And by the way, Violent Leap does 80 slashing damage, so it's not like a small change this. It's turning it up to 104 damage on heroes with more than 250 health. And a lot of the heroes that have more than 250 health in the squishy rolls only have like 25 more health, which isn't like, you know, a comparable percentage increase compared to the Violent Leap damage percentage increase. So I think off the top, as a minor ability, basically turns some of the heroes that he can't one-shot into heroes that he can one-shot. And I don't think that's necessarily a great design choice. Anyway, I have given it 2 stars because I'm going to be generous. It does change his playstyle very slightly because he can, as I said, fight the tank a bit more. But I don't think this is the way he's going to use it. He's going to use it against the heroes that he was good against. Hazard is still really strong right now. And I think this is just going to push him back into, like, very strong status. So I gave him 4 stars in quality. I think this ability is, like, low-key kind of insane. Then we have Reconstitution, which is other minor. Jagged Walls, hits, charge, Spike Guard with 25 energy, up to 50 extra energy. I've got to be honest with you, I was reading some of the numbers on the wiki, and the wiki doesn't deal with energy, which makes me think that energy is an internal metric that no one knows about, really. On the wiki, they deal with, like time for your bar to, like, dissipate, and how much dissipates while you're spike guarding, that type of thing. So, I actually don't know what 25 energy is in the context of all of this, so I'm just going to let you know now, we need to, like, fully see what this actually means to fully understand what happens. But conceptually, from a design standpoint, it actually is quite a good change, because it changes the way you want to use your abilities. Normally, you slash wall at rough at the same time just for the damage, and then shoot someone, and they just explode. Now you might want to hold the wall on that leap, especially if you're going to a comp which is going to put out a lot of burst damage, like maybe there's a Bastion on the enemy team. And instead, you do your slash shot combo. You maybe don't get the one shot, you put the pressure on and give them the old fuck off. Then you put up the spike guard, and as your spike guard's about to run out, you just wall anyone. Ideally more than one person, because you'll get the 50 energy instead. I don't know how much this then gives you the spike guard holding up. I think spike guard normally can hold it for like, is it 2 seconds constantly? Maybe it's a bit higher than that even. Hazard is a special type of hero, right? I don't have the notes on exactly how long he can hold it, but if it gives him like another second or 2 seconds of time, that might be long enough for him to get back to his ability, especially if he like also blocks that LOS for a brief period. It might give him enough time to get back up to their violent leap, and they can just leap away and survive. Or they can leap onto someone else and continue the cycle again. So I've given this as a 4-star design. I think it's actually quite interesting. It changes the ordering of the way things might want to work. I think it's actually a really good minor ability. And I think it's a pretty strong ability as well, assuming it does give you a decent chunk of Spike Guard energy back. But we'll just need to see the numbers of what actual Spike Guard energy means in the context of time you can use Spike Guard. Then we have the major changes. We have Anarchic Zeal. Spike Guard spikes deal 25% lifesteal. I think this is quite weak on the design standpoint, because again, does it really change your playstyle of Hazard? Does it change the situations where you would want to use it? Maybe very, very slightly. I guess on one side of things, rather than just leaping onto one enemy, you could leap onto 2 enemies instead, and you'd get like double the lifesteal because the spike guards would split between 2 separate enemies. But it's really kind of minor, because again, you're going to be dealing with more enemies anyway at the same time, so it's a pretty weak ability. It's really just a buff to the the Spike Guard, and Spike Guard is really strong anyway. Did you need the thing that causes, I can't remember what the damage reduction is, but it's like insane damage reduction, like 80 or 90% damage reduction. Did you need that not only just to do damage, but also to lifesteal as well? I think not. I think it's a bit weird, this ability. I have, for some reason, going to 30 stars in design choice. And I will say, I did these on a different day. What was I thinking? Where's my notes? Where are my notes? I said weak design, barely changes playstyle. I said it promotes being in the enemy's face. Oh, I forgot. It's such a minor thing. I should have given this like 2 stars in the design. It does promote you using Spike Guard in enemy's face and not just on your side of the board. Sometimes if you're like trying to walk up to someone, maybe Spike Guard early because you get caught out of position. It's such a minor thing to give a star for, but apparently I was willing to give a star for that on the previous day. It's ropey, I think. I don't really like that ability. Deep Leap, on the other hand, I gave less. Did I mix these up or something? Violence Leap range is increased by 20%. I actually quite like this one, but clearly not yesterday. Maybe I did mix these up, actually, now that I think about it, when I was noting them down on the spreadsheet, because I definitely added 3 stars in my notes. It's actually is a decision-making thing, mainly for map geometry. There are some maps where the gap is just too large for Hazard to potentially reach over, or even and it says range. I assume it gives you a bit more height as well on this, as well as the length of the leap. If it gives you a little bit of both, then you can maybe access high grounds you couldn't access before. You can access areas on maps where it's too long, which you couldn't do before. So I think there is some reasonable design decision-making on here. And it's a map-by-map basis, and also a comp-by-comp basis. So I actually don't buy Deep Leap. I think I've mixed these two up. It doesn't matter. It works out in the wash. Either way, I gave him a mark C. I think it's fair enough. I think all of his stuff is pretty average, to be honest with you. And the package together, pretty average. One thing I will say is, I think there are reasons to use both of each of the abilities. So in that regards, they get a little bit of a bonus point from me. Now we get to Junker Queen. Junker Queen has Rending Recall. Recalling Jagged Blade from a stuck target refreshes a wound. This ability is really, really weak, I think. I know it's a minor, so I do appreciate it can't be like super duper game changing, but it's super, super, super minor. In case you're wondering, the Rending Recall does, I believe, 30 damage over 3 seconds. That's the wound damage. So if you let the knife stay in for the entirety of the time, you're going to get 60 damage over 6 seconds instead, which is pretty weak. And also you'll get, I think it's 135 health if you leave it the full time, and about 67.5 if you don't leave it in for the full time. It's really small, like it's, whatever way you want to look at it, it's 10 damage per second, which is super, super, super minor. And the healing is only a little bit better. You get 225% back healing from wounds, so do the calculation of 225 onto 10 healing per second 10 damage per second to get you the amount of healing per second you need to get from it. Versus what you normally use Jagged Blade for, which is just pulling someone out of position and axe swinging into them with Carnage. I think it's super, super weak. It is a slightly different way of playing the playstyle, but I think it's so unbelievably weak that it's kind of a bad design decision. I have given it 3 stars because I was trying to not, super knock huge amounts off on the design for things that I think are weak from a quality side of things. Potentially there is a world where if you could buff this, I do like the idea of having a decision making between displacing someone and maybe getting more damage or more healing even, but it's hard, right, to compare it to hitting someone with Carnage and shooting them, so I don't know. I'm not sure about this one. I think it's pretty weak. Battle Shout. Commanding Shout fully reloads Scattergun and increases allied reload speed by 50%. Okay, it slightly changes the playstyle a bit. You can be maybe a bit more pokey before you do your Commanding Shout because you get the reload with it. And also, it's a bit of a nice quality of life thing for any allies around. Not only do you get the speed up from the Shout and the health, or the temporary health you get from the Shout, you're going to get a reload speed. So if you need to reload during this, lads, we're all going in, you get the reload speed as well, so you have ammo to use that moment in time. It just makes sure that everyone's on the same page without needing to communicate in comms, I suppose, is kind of what it is. At the same time, it's sort of just a buff to the ability. It doesn't really change it that much how you use it. It's just it's like a very minor thing, which to be fair is a minor perk. So I've given it 2 stars in design. It doesn't do that much for me, but I do think in quality wise it's actually pretty solid. So I gave it 3 stars quality. Now we get to the majors. Deep wounds. Scattergun hits extend your wounds durations on those enemies by 0.25 seconds. I did many math on this one, and I've come to the conclusion that it's complete garbage, this major, like, astonishingly garbage. And there's also some really unfun things about it. So basically, there are 4 different ways, I think, for wounds to get inflicted on an opponent. You can get a thrown wound from the Jagged Blade, which is 30 for 3 seconds. If you quick melee someone or you get it on the return of the Jagged Blade, you only get 15 damage for 3 seconds. If you use Carnage, which is the axe swing, you get 40 for 3 seconds, and the ultimate is 90 for 4.5 seconds, along with the anti. Basically, these wounds amount to 10 DPS, 5 DPS, 13.3 recurring DPS, and 20 DPS, respectively. And you're getting 0.25 seconds on each of these, so if you're doing this on a blade, you're getting 2.5 damage. And this is on a thrown blade that sticks into an opponent. 2.5 extra damage for hitting a scattergun. If you do it on the quick melee target, you're getting 1.25 damage. If you do it on the Carnage swing target, you're doing 3.3 recurring damage. And if you do it on the ult, you're getting 5 damage for your 0.25 seconds. It's really, really, really minor. And then you also have to bear in mind that it could be really obnoxious if you could continuously extend the wound forever, right? If your shot timing was quicker than 0.25 seconds, you potentially could keep the wound on indefinitely, so they would always be taking this tick damage, and by proxy, you would always be getting this health damage. So that could actually add up if you put multiple different wounds on them, and you're getting all this health back, and you're just continuously keeping it on by just bullying them with the scattergun. You can't do that, though. I mean, for obvious reasons, the reload would interrupt that, but even just on the rate of fire, scattergun fires 1.3 shots per second. So actually, in keeping with the wound duration times we were getting to earlier, which were roughly all 3 seconds with the exception of the ult, which is 4.5 seconds, you're only going to get 2 shots in before your wound duration just ends. And actually, these 2 extensions you'll get on the shots, the 0.5 seconds, doesn't give you another shot in there to get some additional wound time from it. So it's really unsatisfying the way it works. And the same thing is roughly true for the 4.5 second one as well. You can get 3 shots in to get an extension of 0.75 seconds, but that 0.75 seconds doesn't give you another instance where you can shoot to extend for another 0.25 seconds, if you know what I mean. It just, the numbers don't quite add up. The numbers themselves are extremely low. And also, does this change the way you're going to be playing Junker Queen? Do you swing on people with Carnage and not shoot them afterwards? No. Do you ult people and not shoot them? No. I think this is horrible. I actually think this is a really bad ability for a major, quality-wise, and I think design-wise, it's awful. It just doesn't change the way you'd play this hero. Finally, there's Savage Satiation. Carnage's impact damage gains 100% lifesteal. I also don't like this one. Quality-wise is probably fine, but from a standpoint of does this change how I use Carnage? It really doesn't change it that much. Carnage was already rewarding for you if you hit multiple enemies, because obviously you get more bang for your buck if you hit multiple enemies with Carnage. And by the way, Carnage has 105 impact damage, so it's 105 lifesteal per enemy you hit with the axe. But you already got a cooldown reduction for hitting multiple enemies, so it's kind of just like rewarding something you were already doing anyway. So it's just pushing the same playstyle that you already were doing with Junker Queen, if you know what I mean. It just feels like this could, if this was really important, it could have just been on the Queen's kit already as some sort of minor effect of this. I don't really like it just giga buffing out a hero. I think it's not a great way to do the perk, so because of this, I've only given it 1 star in design, but I have given it 3 stars in quality because I do think it's actually pretty useful. There are some minor things you could argue. Maybe it lets you play a bit more aggressively as the Queen because you can just shout fully int out, and if you hit the axe, then all that poke damage you took during the, I'm running at you phase, you can heal it back up again with the axe swing, but it's really like feast or famine, so I actually just don't like it. I think it's a pretty bad perk from a design standpoint. So overall, I'm actually giving her kit an A. I think she's one of the weakest ones from the perk standpoint. Not in terms of quality, just I think the design is really weak. Taking these perks isn't going to make Junker Queen feel any different, in my opinion. I'm also going to not be like the salty people on the internet. I'm not just going to shit on, the Overwatch team and say, well, deal with this information. I think it's horrible. It's garbage. I hate you. Your product sucks. You're copying Marvel Rivals. Yeah, I hate you. I'm going to try and do some constructive stuff. I'm actually going to give some thoughts of what I would have liked to see instead. And actually, for everyone that I give an E to, almost everyone I'm going to give an E to, I'm actually going to give some thoughts of what I would have done instead. And this is one of the nice things about perks as well. You can get perks wrong and it's not too bad. Don't worry about the balance too much. It's fine. They can change the perks going forward so they can pull in perks. This is one of the things I like about the system. Don't get me wrong, I like the system. But anyway, for Junker Queen, how about on the minor perks instead? Let's say you use your commanding shout, you get something called like a magnetic arc. And if you jump, you get like a little boost forward momentum. Basically, it just gives you like a little hop. Not quite as strong as like, you know, the vicious slash, whatever it's called on Hazard, where you can jump across the map. But just a little bit thing that gives you a bit more gap closure to get onto a backline. I think that'd be a really neat thing. It would probably fit into this minor perk, and it does reward you for like jumping over, like not jumping over gaps, but trying to go aggressively to close the gap onto a backline. Maybe it lets you get onto a backline easier than just trying to continuously like fight into a frontline enemy. So I think it would change the playstyle very slightly. And it's a minor perk, so again, minor effect. How about something like when a wound target is cleansed, that you get the adrenaline rush healing back equal to the remaining wound amount in an instant burst? I maybe don't explain this particularly well, but currently Queen's got a big issue that if the opposing team is a Kiriko, Queen's life is kind of miserable. Mainly because Kiriko just like hard counters the ult entirely. It removes the anti-heal, also removes the wounds that they had on them. I think it'd be nice, and again, it's semi-situational. There are other heroes, by the way, that can cleanse as well, so it has other decent matchups. But what if, like, Queen ults, the Kiri cleanses, gets the benefit of the cleanse, like, she removes the anti, she removes the wounds. But Queen then gets that back as health. Like, it just basically will put her back up to full health again, because you'll get the amount of healing that she should have got from the wounds through the cleanse. It kind of means that the cleanse is not just completely giga-fucking you. And she could use her ultimate just to get into the backline, except that she's probably going to get cleansed. Maybe some people get missed by the cleanse, but for the most part, the cleanse, you know, it's going to fuck up her ult a little bit. And then she's in the backline at full health and can start, you know, playing a neutral game again. I think that'd be a pretty fair change, honestly. And I think you could put this as a minor, because there are not that many heroes that can cleanse. There's Zarya, there's Kiri. With the perks, there is Life Weaver as well now. Is there anyone else that can actually cleanse? I'm sure I'm missing someone. Actually, I can't remember. If Arista fortifies, does she cleanse? I don't remember. Either way, there's a very small amount of heroes that can get the cleanse, so I think this will be fine for a minor perk. Then in the major perks, the first one I went like off the rails on, but basically I wanted to do something like, if you watch a cinematic, there's a point in the cinematic where she's like, and I do appreciate this is basically her ultimate, but she's like absorbing all these metallic objects, and then she punches like, I guess the former Junker King, but the guy that like fucked her over, and she like punches in this like arc of like just debris and stuff, like, you know, shatters his mech and all that type of thing. I think it'd be really cool if Queen could do something like that. So how about you get rid of the commanding shout? It just becomes like a passive. Like, you get a weaker form of speed boost and a weaker form of like mild healing or something, or mild regeneration. And instead, what if she pushed a button and any projectile that came within a certain radius of her got absorbed into her, like magnetized into her, sorry, rather than absorbed. And she's taking the damage. Maybe it's a fraction of the damage, but she's taking all that damage for her team. So if you're like, you know, if you're like Bastion blasting her, she's getting hurt by this thing. And at a certain point, she can just activate the ability again and just push it out. It's like an arc in front of, like, maybe even use it as a punch and arcs in front of her. And then she hits those people, does wounds, and maybe the wound damage is somewhat correlated with the amount of damage she absorbed. And then she, you know, she puts her body on the line, and then she starts healing back with adrenaline rush from these wounds she's inflicted. And she tries to play this balancing act, right? She has to, well, she can protect the team from the incoming damage, but she has to be careful, because otherwise she's going to kill herself during it. But if she gets the perfect hit off as well and cleaves into a big group of enemies, she'll get all that health back up again. And she's like, she's just about to die, and you're like, oh god, kill her, kill her, kill her. And her health is going dunk, 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 back up again. And you're like, holy shit, this Queen is now in our backline. She's closed the gap, and we've used all these abilities trying to kill her, and she's played it perfectly. The numbers need tweaking, but I could see something like that being a really cool playstyle while you're just trying to put your body on the line. And it turns Queen into a bit more of a frontline bruiser, rather than what she kind of is now, which is... I don't know what to call Queen. She's like some sort of weird rush dive type thing where she just runs onto like a slow target. You stop them from being able to run away by just knifing them and then just axing them and picking them off and going back again and waiting for your shout to come back up again. She's like very cyclical. She's got a big power spike then weak, big power spike then weak. And then the final one I took sort of like, you know, a note to the recent, somewhat recent April Fool's, where instead of the knife coming back to her, she goes to the knife and turns into a dive tank. That might be too strong, but it would deal with some of the issues of vertical mobility and make it better on certain maps. So there's some of the perks that I would possibly suggest going forwards for Queen. Some of them are easier to implement than others. Then we go into Mauga. It's Mauging time. Kinetic Bandolier. Overrun reloads up to 150 ammo while charging. I really like this. I think this is a super, super, super cool ability. It lets Mauga play as a bit more of a pokey style. Mauga's kind of in a bit of a weird place. It's not like he's weak. It's just like he's very situationally insane, but otherwise kind of garbage. And I think it's hard to play him on ladder, because one of the ways I think you're meant to really play Mauga is like, you sort of wait for this instance where you can punish someone for being like somewhat out of position. And ideally in the process, you don't take any damage because you're such a big fucking hulking guy that if you just step out for a moment, you take like 300 or 400 damage. So you try and keep as much health as you possibly can. Then you just sprint out into this one target and everyone just converges onto me, trying to blow someone up. I think with the Kinetic Bandolier, though, you could potentially poke a little bit from distance. Don't worry about having to reload, like, behind cover. Takes a few seconds. I want to be running. You can't be running, though, because you need to reload so that you can kill the target you jump on. Instead, I poke a little bit, and then suddenly you maybe get someone weak, or you get someone out of position by some means, and you just fucking bull rush that person. And during the course of this, you're reloading your ammo so that when you stomp on them, you have enough ammo to then potentially kill them afterwards. It's also got some additional, like, you know, niche cases besides just this, and at least cases for decision making, because if you're reloading ammo whilst you're charging, it means that charging further rewards you more than charging shorter distances. So I think overall it makes a lot more decision making. I think it's a really cool minor, and it certainly would be a minor buff. So I've given this 4 stars in design. I actually think it's 4 stars in the quality. I think low-key it's actually pretty good. It increases like his damage uptime potentially. His other minor is 2 hearts. While on an objective, Mauga counts as 2 heroes and regenerates 20 health per second. Kind of insane, to be honest with you. It's just fucking insane. So, in case you're wondering what the count as 2 heroes counts for, if you're on an escort type map, you sometimes may see above the payload a symbol for 1. That's because you've left someone on the payload pushing the cart while you're having fun and enjoying the game. The cart moves faster, though. I know this is like Kel Surprise. The cart moves faster if you have more than 1 person on it, to a cap of 3 people. How about, though, instead you just put Mauga and another guy on the cart? Then it moves as fast as if you had 3 people on the cart. So that's kind of like the benefit of it. It's also true for other game modes where there are objective-based things that cap faster for more people. Hybrids, Koth does as well, I believe. So there's like some low-key minor like use for this, so I kind of like it. I will say this counting as 2 heroes doesn't matter for push, because push doesn't go any faster for more heroes. So it's kind of like subjectively weak on push maps because it doesn't really do anything. I was also trying to think of, is there any hero interaction that matters based on number of heroes? And the only one I could think of possibly, and I'm not convinced this would actually work, is Wrecking Ball's adaptive shields, because he gets more shielding depending on the number of heroes around him. I assume Mauga would now count for 2 heroes, assuming he was on an objective, but I don't know how this spaghetti coding works. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's literally just for objective-based reasons, but that'd be fun things to test. It's a really minor interaction. For the most part, though, as long as you're on the objective, you're getting 20 health per second regeneration, which is, again, more healing for Mauga. Mauga is such a big, chunky lad. He has, like, no shielding until he can ult. And he's kind of at the mercy of his supports keeping him up. So it gives him a little bit more self-sustain. I don't hate it. Situation, I think it's pretty good. Design, I've given it 3 stars too, because it's a bit of, like, you know, it's a bit of a ploddy design decision because you are just stood on something you'd probably be doing for the most part anyway. And for quality, I've only given it 2 stars. I think it's pretty minor, to be honest with you, as an effect. But it is a minor, so I'm fine with it. Again, I can forgive quality and design being a bit lower on the minors, because that's kind of what they're meant to be. They're meant to be very small changes to the game. In the major standpoint, we have Firewalker. Overrun ignites enemies. This is actually pretty spooky. I think people like underestimate this to some degree. Does it change how Mauga would overrun? Yeah, it could do, right? You're rewarded now for hitting like everyone on the enemy team. Also, if you overrun and hit the guy that you're going to stomp onto, you can get instant crits. Like, you could just explode this guy, because one of the, like, there's not a weakness per se, because it was already pretty strong to stomp on someone and start shooting them, but you had to, like, get the burning on that target as well before you start doing critical damage on. Is it Gunny that does the critical damage? I can't remember, or Cha-Cha. I think it's Gunny. Before you get the critical damage, you need to get them burning. If you can just pre-ignite them, you're just going to absolutely fucking shred the guy that you hit on the stomp. So it's basically you're going to kill the person that you stomp, as long as you overran them with the Firewalker. And I think you will always be doing that if you stomp on them. It also potentially rewards you for doing these weird power sliding plays where you just like grind Malga into a wall backwards and forwards, and you can just overrun people and just keep igniting them. So I think there's some fun stuff you can do here. So from a design standpoint, I've given it 3 stars. There's not too much you can do about it, but it does mean that you want to think a bit more. Maybe you want to run further. I think low-key, this is actually a pretty strong thing. I think it's going to make Malga better. And then we have Combat Fuel. Critical hits grant Malga 2 temporary overhealth on cardiac overdrive's next use, up to 100 over health. Yeah, it's pretty good. It doesn't super change how you would use cardiac overdrive, to be honest with you. But what it is good is it's situationally good against heroes that Malga hates playing against, namely Ana. Because Malga's entire kit is cardiac overdrive, really, when it comes down to it. He needs to be able to get this self-sustain from dealing damage. Through critical hits, he gets healing back. Also in Cardiac Overdrive, he gets lifesteal. So both of them combined, really, all the damage he takes on the initiation, he gets it back up through this. And what Ana can do is take this moment in timing where Malga desperately needs this healing and just throw an anti-nade on him. And it kind of just fucks his life up. So much so that you basically need to run Kiriko with him, just in case they're going to run it an Ana, because he will just die otherwise in this cycle. Now, if you spend a bit of the early part of the fight getting some of these critical hits, and bear in mind again, you don't need to hit headshots, this can be hitting burning targets, you can generate 100 overhealth when you pop Cardiac Overdrive, and overhealth can't be negated by the anti, so you're going to get this 100 health guaranteed, so this might actually keep you up. And if you do get antied, maybe you can then find some cover to try and stay alive while the anti wears off, and you maybe can pop out again and start trying to heal again. So it reduces your reliance on a Kiriko in a Malga comp, and at the same time makes the Ana slightly worse into you. So situationally, I think this is pretty good. So because of those reasons, again, I've given it 3 stars in design and 4 stars in the quality. I think both of these mages are actually pretty good. I think it'd be hard to decide which one to pick as well. I think situationally both are fairly good. I've given them as a C overall. They are still 3 stars, I think, on the design. But I'm pretty happy with it, sorry. Pretty hard? What the fuck was I about to say? I'm pretty happy with the Malga changes. I think it's actually a really good bar for the tanks too. If you're above this bar, you actually got a pretty good design, in my opinion. Then we get to the Battle Cattle. It's Orisa. She has 2 minor perks, Heat Dissipator. Primary fire critical hits refund heat. Basically, assuming you're critical hitting people, your primary fire can just go off forever. In case you don't know, the more and more you fire with Orisa, the more and more the heat bar goes up, and eventually overheats. And this is kind of like your reload type mechanic, right? If you just keep tap shooting, or you shoot, wait, you can stop that overheating going through, so you don't have this big off time where you can't shoot your gun anymore, as it's trying to cool down. Now it rewards you for aiming for the head. Does it change Orisa's playstyle? Minorly, right? You're probably aiming more towards the neck now than the body. Unless, though, you're playing against, like, actual legitimate bots that are just straight line walking into you. You're probably not going to get that scenario where you can just infinitely shoot. There are some cases, though, where it actually is pretty obnoxious. D.Va is probably the big example of this. If you've got a massive crit hitbox, you might actually be able to keep this Heat Dissipator perk active continuously. Now, on the flip side, D.Va can just eat your projectile, so you're not actually hitting it, which means you're not critical hitting, which means you're not refunding heat. But if you can get into a cycle where D.Va wastes her DM, you could actually just blast D.Va now with this minor. So I think there's some intrigue about it. It's a pretty weak design choice. I've given it 2 stars in design, and quality 3 stars. I don't think it really pushes Orisa forwards that much more. It's okay, though. Fleeting Bulwark. Fortify briefly grants an additional 100 overhealth when activated. I hate this. Can I go on a rant? Orisa, I hate the rework. I think they ruined Orisa's rework. I think she was a boring hero in Overwatch 1, but she was a necessary boring hero. I think her shield was fine. We're going to deal with the shield in a moment, by the way, but I think her shield was fine. I think it was fine that she was this anchor tank where she just holds a big line of sight, has this shield. If they break the shield, you have to step behind cover, wait for your next shield, come back out again, put your shield down. If people tried to run across this gap, you had the shield and you could all just blast them. She basically just held this area right, and you bunkered into this area. The weakness should always have been for that comp, in my opinion, that if you got on top of it as the team, she should have died. She should have just instantly fucking died. And the thing that made it really, really obnoxious to play against was actually Fortify. I do agree, I think the ult was also overtuned the old ult, the bongos. But I think Pull was fine. I think it was a strong ability, but it was fine. Fine on the tank, it's okay. It had some skill in it. I was stunned when they reworked every ability on Orisa, barring a primary fire and also Fortify. Fortify is such a shit ability. It's a no-skill ability that makes it unkillable. So I don't hate... I do hate. I hate that they've improved Fortify as one of the perks. I think it's a really shit thing to do. It's super boring. It's already super strong. It's boring. It's hateful. It's a hateful fucking ability. I just don't like it. I don't think she should be rewarded for fortifying. I think, honestly, of all the things of Orisa that I would have reworked, I really would have got rid of Fortify. So I hate it. That's where I'm coming from. I just don't like it. I gave it 1 star design. I do think on quality, though, it could be potentially 4 stars. But even then, Fortify already is pretty much making Orisa unkillable. It's just making it even more unkillable. Does that really move the needle too much? I don't know. I just don't like it. I think this perk is super, super lazy. So I actually think I'm ignoring the bias I've got against her design choice. You want to know the real kicker? I actually like Orisa. I just hate Fortify. I think it was a worst ability. I'd have taken everything back from Orisa's first kit. Maybe, like, tone down the bongos a little bit. And just got rid of Fortify and give a Javelin. Give her something that can knock someone away situationally that gets on top of her. That's fine. It's a skill check. Anyway, let's move on before I just make this entire video about Orisa. A mage's a charged Javelin. Hold down your Javelin button to charge the energy Javelin, increasing its speed and knockback, pierces enemies at full power. I really like this one. As much as I didn't like Fleeting Bulwark, I think this is a really cool idea. I actually kind of love it. It gives you multiple use of the ability. You can tap it for a quick way to knock back a single guy. You can supercharge it, and this can give you the cleave and potentially ability to knock people off maps, for example. You have some sort of deciding factor in that. Also, if there's like big rush comp coming towards you and you charge this Javelin, you could potentially hit multiple people, knock them back, and keep them in your range where that you can kill them, and they can't kill you. So there's also a payoff for this as well. You don't just get the free value, because while you're charging the Javelin, you're not shooting anymore. So you're trading DPS at the moment for this instant big skill shot, where if you hit a really good skill shot, you hit multiple people. And again, I assume you're going to get the wall damage if you knock them into a wall. You could do some really disgusting things, like you could just snipe someone out of the air, take them out of the rush, and win the fight that way. So I think as much as I hate Fortify, this is a really cool idea to give people the fuck off if they're trying to get close to it and you're like a big poke hero. So I really like this. I've given it 5 stars in design. On the quality side of things, I think I need to see the actual numbers of this. I don't really know what the speed and knockback will feel like. They don't really say it on here, so it could be like insane. It could also be pretty weak, but conceptually I like it. And I found we have Protective Barrier. It converts your Javelin spin instead to launch a barrier. It's basically the old Orisa shield, right? And this was such a core part of a kit in the past. It was a curved shield where people could get into it, and you could do pirate ship stuff. But I liked it. I think it was fine that Overwatch had that hero. It was kind of like it's kind of like what I'd say Widowmaker is to the DPS role. She's this extreme range hero. She's always going to be good at extreme range. It's kind of like her gimmick. Orisa was the tank. She was, in my opinion, she should have been the tank that had the best range damage. She should always have had this. She had this anchoring shield, but she should have equally like Widowmaker have this insane weakness that if you got on top of her, she should have just not been able to deal with it, in my opinion. Anyway, she gets her shield back. which I think is a nice thing. It does lead to potentially building some more comps. You can go back to pirate ship stuff. So actually, from a design perspective, I do think this makes a pretty big difference to the way you'd play Orisa, and actually overall how you'd play the comp. So I actually quite like this one as well. I gave this one 5 stars as well. And I think this one could be strong on certain maps with insanely long sightlines where you'd normally play Sigma. For example, Circuit Royale. I see a world where you play Orisa instead. Like, imagine on Circuit on the first point, you go around that first corner, right, and then there's a big long stretch with a bridge, and then the second corner where it gets towards where you cap. Most people play pretty far back on that point anyway. Imagine just playing the full shebang back rather than at that car where I think you would normally play with Sigma. And you just put an Orisa there, because Orisa has the range that Sigma doesn't. She can fire from that point all the way down. I think that's going to be really strong on that map. So, for these reasons, I think it's a pretty strong ability. And actually, overall, I've given Orisa an A as well. I think she's a pretty solid kit. With the exception of Fleeting Bulwark, which I fucking hate. But fortunately for Orisa, it's a minor ability, so I can actually kind of forgive it. I'm giving way more onus onto the majors. If a major is bad, that's going to affect the score way more than a minor. So, yeah, pretty good design overall. It's just, get rid of Fortify. Ramatra. He has Void Surge. Void Accelerator periodically releases a burst of 6 additional projectiles during continuous fire. Sure. It rewards a more pokey style of Ramatra. It's not particularly strong, like when you compare this again to Orisa or Sigma, but it's a potential different way to play it, especially if you come out on the Ramatra and, you know, you want to do this, like, brawler thing and then, like, some insane Gigapoke comp. Maybe it lets you fight versus them just a little bit more, but yeah, it's okay. It's a solid okay. Again, I'd like to see the numbers a bit on, like, when these projectiles come out and how they come out, but I can see a world where it's, like, okay. I've given it, like, 3 and 3. I've been a bit safe on this. It does change the way you'd play Ramatra. You'd probably be less in Nemesis form and more in... Not Nemesis form. What's his normal form called? I actually can't remember what his normal form's called. Anyway, in his stood-up staff mode, he's going to be more happy. There's then Prolonged Barrier. Void Barrier's duration is increased by 25%. I think this is pretty weak, to be honest with you. It normally lasts, by the way, 4 seconds, so you're getting 5-second duration instead. Does that really move the needle? I think it's pretty minor. I also don't think it really changes your playstyle. The barrier is basically just good to stop an instance of a large amount of damage or let you and your team cross some sort of gap. So I think it's a pretty weak ability, and I think from a design point, it's pretty weak as well. Again, I can forgive this on the minor. It's a minor ability. It's kind of just a straight buff to the kit that doesn't really change his playstyle, but I can live with it on the minors, so... anyway, let's move on to the majors. Nanite Repair. Ramatra is healed for 50 health per second while within Ravenous Vortex. I think this is kind of, maybe again from quality side of things, not great, but at the same time, it's actually quite interesting. From a design point of things, you can tell already that I kind of like it, because it changes the way you'd want to use your Vortex. Normally, you're using the Vortex to catch someone, right? Catch a mobile hero or something like that, or stop someone from escaping from you. Instead, you could throw your Vortex roughly at your feet, and you could trade versus the tank. It can give you some additional frontline pressure. Because if you put Vortex down and you're punching away at a Reinhardt who's swinging at you, you're getting 50 health per second. That's not a small amount, and you can't destroy the Vortex. So it gives you this huge advantage in the 1v1 versus the opposing tank in the front line. So, and also, they're slowed in this Vortex. So they can't, like, get out of it easy. It's like, we're going to have a fight on uneven terms, and you can't decide not to. So I actually think low-key it's kind of good into certain matchups. There are some tanks that could get out of the Ravenous Vortex fairly easily, so versus them it's kind of a weak decision. But again, that's what I think the perk should be. I think situationally should be good, situationally should be bad. So I really like the idea of this perk. I've given it 4 stars. I can't remember if I put on my notes. Why did I knock this a point off? I don't know. Maybe it's just my gut feeling. I gave it 4 stars in design. I actually quite like it. For quality, I've only given it 2. I think it's actually quite weak compared to just some of the general other perks. I don't think it really moves the needle for Ramatra, let's put it that way. I think a lot of the heroes where this would be good against for Ramatra into that other hero is just not a comp that's strong right now, so... but situationally, could be good, so I'm fine with it. Vengeful Vortex. While Ravenous Vortex is airborne, use E again to detonate it, dealing 50 damage and pulling enemies downwards. This is so cool. I love this. It increases the skill expression on Ravenous Vortex. Because not only could you just throw it at your feet and slow down a ground target. You could yeet it into the air at a Pharah, time it perfectly to push E again, and it just explodes outwards, grabs the pharmacy, and yanks him down to the earth. Like, I think people wanted that ability to work when they first saw Ram's kit, so it's a really good skill check. It's very thematically good for how I think it was intended to be used, of like yanking these flyers out the sky, so very good into flyer-based comps. So yeah, I'm actually really happy with that. Also, just low-key, if you could time this into, like, imagine a Winston diving at you or something, or one of your teammates, and you throw, like, at a 90-degree angle your Ravenous Vortex, and you catch it from the sky, the Winston this is, and just yank him down, then it's going to feel so good. Your dopamine receptors, bang, 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 they're just going to be firing off at all times. And that's kind of what you want in Overwatch. It kind of reminds me of that, like, that interaction of, if you've ever Winston bubbled a Diva Bomb that was going to kill your team, and you do it in the mid-air. I've done it once in my history of playing Overwatch, and I'm just telling you right now, I was the biggest boy on town that day, because that's how I felt. I felt so strong. And anyway, I think that's what the game should make you feel. So I like the idea of this ability. I think it's really good. So again, I gave this 5 stars. I do think it's going to be quite weak, because it's fairly situational where it's going to be good. It's going to be pretty hard to use as well, so I don't know if the juice is necessarily worth the squeeze on the amount of skill it's going to take to use this properly versus the actual result you get from it, but I like it nonetheless. Overall, I've given Ram a B, but it should really be like a B plus type of thing. Like, he's very close to being in the A territory. I really like his kit. I actually think I didn't put him into A only because the minor prolonged barrier I think is super weak. Now we get to Reinhardt. Minors, Crusader's Resolve. While using Barrier Field, your passive health regeneration triggers 50% sooner. This is a Cloudy buff. I think Cloudy has designed this decision. So there's different ways to play Reinhardt, right? Most people play Reinhardt as, like, I think the game devs sort of intended it where, come on guys, I'm your shield. I will frontline walk you into battle. Huzzah! And you're just like, dunk, 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 and you just walk into battle with this massive shield while the opposing team is just blasting it. Your team gets positioned because of this, because you're holding this space. And eventually your shield breaks and it's like, team, I need to retreat. Actually, you'd be charging away at that point because your shield's broken. And you wait for your shield to come back and you repeat the cycle. The other way of playing Reinhardt is I'm playing as German Winston, who can't go up. You just charge into their back line, and you're like, guys, you have to deal with me. I have, whatever it is now, 600 health, maybe even more than 600 health. A lot of it is armor. You deal with me. I'm going to beat the shit out of your back line. And I feel like this is kind of the way that Cloudy plays it, where he's almost using it as a dive tank. And really what he's a brawl tank, but a dive tank without vertical mobility. And he goes on these backline heroes, and he uses his shield potentially just, you know, bait the opposition, because they're not dealing with the objective while they're dealing with Reinhardt. And Reinhardt can make it really hard to deal with him. He has like a 1,500 health shield. It's really fucking annoying to have a Reinhardt in your back line. So anyway, this Crusader's Resolve really just promotes the int style that I think Cloudy would enjoy. You shift into the opposing team's backline, you take some amount of damage on the shift, probably you swing maybe on the backline a little bit, you take a bit more damage, and then suddenly you shield up and put your back to a corner or something, and your regeneration will trigger 50% sooner. Bearing in mind your regeneration, I think normally would trigger at 5 seconds, right, for a tank, so it's going to regenerate instead at 2.5 seconds, which is when the support regeneration triggers. And you need to not be taking damage during that process. Hey, Reinhardt has a big shield to stop him from taking the damage, so you're basically trading your barrier field's shield to give you more health again so that you can go back to swinging on your opponent. And then you're using your health to make sure your barrier shield comes back up again. And actually, during all of this, you're also letting your shift come back up onto cooldown, so you can then shift onto another backliner, or you can shift back into your team, and so on and so forth. So it rewards a way more dynamic playstyle in Reinhardt than the normal, I'm the frontline tank, I'm going to walk down main holding a shield. So I think it's actually kind of a cool idea. I'm a little bit spooked by it because I don't know what the lower ranked Ryan's going to start doing with this. I have some ideas. Anyway, I've actually given it 4 stars in design and 3 stars in quality. I think it's just Cloudy buff. Then we have Fiery Uptake. The barrier field is healed for 100% of fire strikes damage dealt. By the way, this is your shield, in case you're wondering. It's okay. I think it's a bit boring. Situation that can be quite good. If you're going to be against a pirate ship, which now is like somewhat feasible because Orisa has the shield back again, that comp is very, very tightly like grouped together normally because you're behind the shield. And actually, it's kind of a weakness of Reinhardt that that comp can just blast his shield down and he can't really do anything. He can't close the gap because he doesn't have enough health to do it. Maybe this combined together with like the shift, the shield, and now the fiery uptake potentially restoring, you know, a big chunk of shield back. Maybe it's enough that Ryan could actually compete into these bunker-esque type comps. That's kind of why I situationally see it being useful. It doesn't super change how I think Reinhardt would play. I guess it does somewhat reward you trying to hit two people at the same time with a fire strike. So it's not completely without value in my opinion. Other things worth noting is because it's damage dealt, it can be damage boosted. So if you nanoed the Rhine or you mercy damage boost it with the beam, you're going to get more shield health back from a fiery uptake. So there's some interesting things you could do with this, but I think it's very, very situational. I've given it 3 stars, though, on design and 3 stars on quality. I don't think this, again, really pushes Ryan towards being a meta pick. Then his major choices are, while Barrier Field is active, use left click to damage and knock back enemies. Basically, while you're playing Rectangle Man, you can shield bash people. I kind of think this is bad now from a quality standpoint. Why do you really want to knock people away when you're Reinhardt? Your optimal range is melee range, right? You've got a big, massive metal rocket hammer. Why would you want to knock people away? I guess very, very situational. If people are just running through your shield, like, haha, I'm going to ignore the big German man and take, all your squishies. You could be like, no, you're fucking not running past my shield. Bang! Get back in front of me. I'm going to beat the shit out of you now. I think that's meant to be like the situation. So if you went into some sort of like rush v rush, maybe the shield slam could be a bit more viable. But I think it's kind of weak. It doesn't really fit in with what Reinhardt kind of wants to be doing. So yeah, I'm not sure about it. I gave it 2 stars in design. There are potentially situations maybe you want to do it, but we also have to see the numbers. I don't know how far you're knocking people back. I also don't know what the damage is on this, so but I suspect it's not going to be great, so I've given it quality 1 as well. That's a gut feeling, though. If it does, like, 300 damage, then obviously it's really good. Finally, there's Crushing Victory. Charge damage grants temporary overhealth for 50% of the damage dealt. It's Cloudy design again, ladies and gentlemen. He's back. He's in the system. He's in the system files. He's changing them. So this is kind of interesting. It promotes, again, your Ryan just charging somewhat willy-nilly. It's not quite willy-nilly, but sometimes Ryan could charge into situations which he got into a little bit of trouble, let's put it that way. Now, way back when, he used to not be able to cancel his charge. He can now somewhat mitigate it by cancelling the charge to stop him just ending up in the opposing team's backlines. However, you could still say that if you charge, you can't be shielding while charged, so you were always liable to be getting slept, and hooked, and that type of thing. So there was always this risk-reward between you charging an opposing team, and often that risk-reward wasn't favourable for the charge. It was actually better to play the Rectangle Man playstyle. Now, though, if you're getting a big chunk of overhealth, and I can't remember what Pin does in damage, but it's like, isn't it like 250 or 350 damage? It's disgusting. I think it's 350, right? If you're getting like 175 shields back if you pin someone, it suddenly makes that risk-reward a little bit more rewarding, so it kind of promotes you just pinning the opposing team tank, taking that risk. If I hit the pin, I'm going to win this trade. I have 175 more health. They have 350 less health. There's no way I lose this trade. So, again, it promotes a bit of a different playstyle. You might not be pro that playstyle, but it certainly makes Ryan a bit more of an aggressive guy rather than this lumbering rectangle boy. So, again, 4 stars in Cloudy design, and I think it's going to be a 3-star quality. I don't think any of these will really push Ryan into a meta viable state. But situationally, on certain maps, maybe he sees a bit of play on like very, 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 very tight maps. Tell you what mistake I made. Should have refilled this before I started. Anyway, Ryan I've given C2. I think he's, again, a pretty good benchmark here. I think all of his abilities are pretty solid. Now we get to Roadhog. Roadhog was always going to be an interesting one because Roadhog is in a position where he just doesn't see any play and basically has never seen any play since going to 2. Well, since Overwatch 2, he's basically seen 0 play. I was going to say something that I couldn't, I was going to make a check I couldn't cash then. I was going to say he's not seen play ever. That's not quite true. He has seen play, but he only really sees play when he's in like a disgusting damage state where like he could shield break people. This was in 222. Other than that, he sees like almost zero play. He's kind of a really weird tank in the form that he doesn't really do what tanks normally do. He sort of just threatens killing people, which is a different way to tank things. Like, you know, don't occupy this space because I'm going to kill you. Anyway, let me get to the abilities. He has Scrap Hook. Chain Hook hits reload 2 ammo. I think it's a pretty shit ability, to be honest with you. Not because I think it's necessarily bad, but it sort of rewards bad play. It sort of means if you hook someone and you had no shots left over, which did happen to some people, like if you weren't particularly high skilled on the hero. Certainly happened to me. You would hook someone in, and it's like, holy shit, I have no shot left, so you can't commit to the one-shot combo, and they would escape, and you'd feel really stupid. Now, as long as you hit the hook, which is, you know, necessary for the hook combo, you will always have that shot to hit someone. That being said, I still think you would prefer to have some more ammo left after you hooked anyway, just to, like, finish off the kill in case you don't get the one-shot or if you hook a tank instead. So I think it's a pretty weak ability, but it's also kind of annoying because if you hook someone on one ammo, it's worse than just spending the other ammo and then hooking them. I think it's just a really weird way to do things. So I've actually given this design 1 and quality 2. I don't think it moves the needle too much for Hog versus what he does now, which is just have more than one ammo left when he's, you know, hooking someone. There's then Hog's Toss. Pigpen's throw range is increased by 50%. It does change things slightly. You normally use Pigpen just to complete the one-shot combo on a squishy. You could conceivably now throw the Pigpen pretty far away and use it to catch someone or help your team catch someone down. So I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say it does do something in a design perspective, but I think it's super, super shit. So I'm giving it quality 1, but design 3, it does change how you'd use it slightly, but I don't think you'd pick Hog because of it. Anyway, they were minor perks, so it's fine, we can forgive them. Major perks, Invigorate. Take a breather rapidly increases Roadhog's movement speed by 30%. Yeah, that's actually pretty spooky. That changes dramatically how you could use Roadhog, so I think this is a really good design. As much as I don't like Hog, and I don't really like Hog as a design, but this is an interesting thing you could do, because not only can you use it, and I think a lot of people would see this and go like, okay, Hog uses Take a Breather and just runs away, right, while he's taking too much damage, and this increases his survivability. Yeah, it does increase his survivability. The alternate way of looking at this, though, and it's kind of why I like it as a design standpoint, because you could use it in multiple different forms, you could take a breather and run someone the fuck down. Let's say there's a soldier on your flank, and I assume this doesn't give you the speed to catch up with soldier, but let's play devil's advocate here. Actually, let's say it's a Cassidy that goes on the flank instead, who hasn't got a great movement ability, and he's plinking away, and you as Roadhog, red laser eye sees this Cassidy on the flank, you're just sprinting after this Cassidy, and he's like, holy shit, I'm in trouble. Help, I'm in danger, Ralph Wiggum. And he gets onto the flank, catches up to the Cassidy, and then you use your hook rather than an initiation tool to, you know, pull someone out of position and shoot them. You use it as catch. Someone's trying to run away from you. No, you're not. You're not fucking getting away from me. I'm going to run onto that angle, I'm going to hook you back in, and then I'm going to kill you. So it's definitely multiple different ways to use it. And it's actually pretty positive, because if you use Take a Breather in an offensive sense, which actually I could see it being the stronger form of using it now, you can't use it as a defensive tool, so you would need some sort of backing up from the rest of your team. But it's going to be frightening seeing Roadhog running people. Anyway, I've actually given this 5 stars on design. I think it's actually a really cool design. Conceptually, I don't think it moves the needle enough for Roadhog to make him see play, but it's probably a better state than he is now, so I've given him 3 stars on quality. There's a Hog Dragon Exposure. Take a Breather also heals nearby allies for 50% of its healing. I seem to remember this being in some sort of early test for Overwatch 2, when they were considering going to a single tank. And I think this was an ability actually on base Roadhog. And they took it out because I don't know why it didn't work. It was like not intuitive what was happening. Anyway, it's back as a perk now. It's a bit boring as an ability, but it does reward you playing some sort of type comp. So there is some sort of like decision making about taking this versus not taking it. You could also use this not just as a defensive tool. You could use it as an offensive tool. You admittedly you can't run in with them because that's the other major, but Let's say you're playing frontline Hog and you're playing with a Reaper, and you just use Hog during exposure to give the Reaper 50% of your healing from Take a Breather. So he just makes an unkillable DPS in your front line, and you just bully the tank instead. So there is some, like, there's some viability in using this in multiple different ways. I can actually see this being pretty obnoxious as well. If you really just fully group together and your opposing team doesn't have an anti, they're going to be pretty goddamn unkillable with a Roadhog now. They're taking a lot of damage, but you're basically giving them a shit ton of ult charge. It's what you're going to be doing, but you could really keep someone alive, like El Presidente style, like a Zen even. Just stand next to the Zen the entire game, just huffing away, and they're going to be really hard to kill, so... Interesting design standpoint. I think there are reasons to use it and reasons not to use it, so... I've actually given this 4 stars in design, and I've given it 3 stars in quality. I don't think any of these make Hog see any play at a competitive level, but... I certainly think people will test it out, and maybe on certain points in certain comps, it could actually be viable. Anyway, overall, I've given Hog a B, and actually, it's kind of like a B+. He almost made it into the A tier. It's really just a scrap hook thing, which I think was a bit weak, and Hog-driven exposure, I think, it's a little bit low-hanging fruit for how you use the ability. There's not a lot of skill expression in it. Now we get to Sigma. Kinetic Cycle. Absorbing projectiles with Kinetic Grasp also reduces accretion cooldown. It's pretty minor. I will give it that. It's pretty minor. It does reward you for using Kinetic Grasp maybe more aggressively. Normally right now, you know, you shield, pew pew pew, pew pew pew. Maybe you drop your shield, pew pew pew. You put your shield back up, pew pew pew. At that point, normally your shield breaks from your opposing team actually shooting you. And then at that point, you're kind of like stuck in a situation where like, I need to get back to cover, or I need to get back to my team, or just let my shield start to recharge again. And that's when you'll use your Kinetic Grasp to absorb a large amount of incoming damage to keep you alive, to get your cooldowns back, and you can restart the cycle again. Now what you could do is like, okay, I'm not going to absorb a huge amount of damage anymore as a defensive Kinetic Grasp. I'm going to absorb a little bit of damage early in the fight with Kinetic Grasp to get me an accretion reduction on cooldown. So I started the fight with accretion, I get another accretion early, and I can try and put it out to do more damage, and actually get a few more stuns as well. I think it's pretty minor, but it is a different way to do things, so... And actually, we'll get to the other minor in a minute, but I think you might just take this one because it's kind of like consistently, it's okay. Anyway, I've given it 3 stars in design, 2 stars in the quality. I don't think it really moves the needle for Sigma, but it's a minor, so I can forgive it. The other one is Massive Impact, which... Honestly, I feel like this was Emong design thing. I wish it was called like Big Rock or Big Impact. Accretion's knockdown duration increases up to 3 seconds based on the travel distance. This is really memey in my opinion. So you're sort of rewarded. There is a decision-making aspect to this, I suppose, but if you accretion, aka throw your Big Rock, at someone that's further away, you could knock someone down for more than 3 seconds. I can't remember what accretion's actual knockdown time is. I haven't noted it on here, but it's pretty sizable. It's like approximately a second, so I assume if you hit someone across the entirety of the map, they're going to be knocked down for 4 seconds. The issue is you can't really follow up on that as Sigma, so you'd require a teammate to be on that end of the map to kill them with 4 seconds of time, which is probably reasonable for most of the cast. But I think it's such a meme combo. You're not going to have someone on the other side of the map but with, like, the massive impact damage. I guess the way it's going to be coded as well is, it says travel distance. I assume it includes going up. Maybe you start throwing rocks literally into the skybox and then hope that they just land on people like, you know, spooky meteorites instead. Perhaps that's the actual optimal way of running this, but it seems just super memey to me. Anyway, I've decided this was Emong design. It's Big Rock strat. 2 stars in design, and I think it's 2 stars quality. I think neither of these minors are particularly good, but again, they're minors. They're okay. The majors are where things get pretty spicy for Sigma. Hyper Strike. Every 5 direct hits with the Hyperspheres, your next successful quick melee levitates and knocks away enemies. This low-key is really, really cool. It actually overcomes a weakness of Sigma's, but in a skill-type matchup. So one of the issues with Sigma is he doesn't like people up close, right? This includes both brawl tanks and dive tanks. He doesn't really like fighting against a Winston. He doesn't really like fighting against a Reinhardt or a Remarch or that type of thing. He wants to fight people at mid-range, mid to long-ish range, where he gets most of his Hypersphere damage. Now, if you hit direct hits, it's not splashy, it has to be directs, while that opposing team is setting up their dive or their rush, you charge up a Hyperstrike, and this gives you the ability to have someone in your face and you just smack them with a quick melee, and they'll be in your face because they are a hero with shorter range than Sigma at the very least. You still have to hit it though, it's a skill check, you have to hit that quick melee as well. And if you do, you push them away, you're pushing them back into Sigma's desired range, you're keeping them away from your backline as well. I think it's a really cool ability. It requires you to actually be skillful, it beats a requirement that Sigma's not great at, and it's only going to be situationally that good. If you're in a very tight, closed space, you can't actually knock them away that far, they'll just get a wall instead, so it's very situationally good. I think for all those reasons, I've actually given it 5 stars in the design. I've actually given it 4 stars in the quality as well. I think it's actually an extremely solid ability. If you're going up against someone that you had a pretty good idea, or at least during the course of the game they've been playing Winston or something on circuit, you could play with Hyper Strike and just fuck the Winston over. Like, every time he dives, you just punch him back, and the Winston just doesn't have the means to get back close to you again until another shift cycle happens. So, I think it's a really, really cool ability. It also punishes the opposing team if they just take endless pokes, so I really like it. He also has levitation. Activate and hold double jump to briefly levitate upwards. Again, it's cool. Sigma, another weakness is they don't have great mobility. He only really has it in his ultimate where he can rise up. Otherwise, he's not very good on maps that require you to take high ground. Levitation gives him the opportunity to take high ground. Obviously not as good as a dive tank. It's, I imagine, going to be pretty slow when you levitate, and also briefly. I assume you can't get from the ground to like the top of the ship on Gibraltar, for example. So I think it's a pretty minor value add, but nonetheless, if you want to play this poke style, or your team wants to, or insists on playing double sniper, maybe you can then make Sig work on maps he would otherwise not have worked on. Anyway, I've given this one 4 stars and a 3-star quality. I think it's probably weaker than the Hyper Strike for the most part, but situationally I could see some reasons why you'd want to take levitation instead. Again, I've given this guy a B as the overall mark. Pretty good majors, and actually pretty good minors. Again, it's a B+. He's very close to being an A. Then we get to Winton. Short circuit. Tesla cannon deals 30% more damage to deployable objects. Ultra niche. If you're going up against, Symmetra or Torbjorn, cool. I also know by deployable objects, would that include Orisa's deployable shield? Because it is called deployable shield. And by that proxy, does that mean that Ryan's shield is deployable, or is it not deployable? So I'd actually like to see a sheet of what they class as a deployable being, but I assume it's just going to be like anything that's a turret. Or anything that has its own separate health bar, I guess, would be what I would say. Like, for example, I imagine Winston's bubbles is deployable as well. So actually, maybe it's not too bad. Maybe even to the mirror, that's actually fine. Maybe you will want Short Circuit to blow up your opposing Winston's bubble. So, yeah, I'm fine with this. It's a niche thing. In the situation where it's niche, it's pretty good. I'm going to 3 stars in design and 2 on quality. It's probably going to be weak. There are going to be some matchups where, like, especially if your opponent swaps, where it just does nothing, you'll have taken this perk and you'll get no value from it, which probably sucks, but, it's not the end of the world, especially since the heroes that this is going to be good against, like, are the ones that are good against you. So it's not too bad that you lose your minor perk to put off your opponent from playing a comp that is good into you. That's probably not a bad trade for the minor perks. I will also say on this that I think this goes down in design and actually possibly quality in Season 16, because that will have hero bans as well, and potentially then you could have just banned Torbjorn instead. Like, if you're like doing it as a Winston Tracer comp and you want to play dive everywhere, I suspect you would like put your you'd collate your bans together to try and guarantee that you got Torbjorn, because it's going to be a really, really annoying hero to play into with these two guys. In which case, you just wouldn't ever take this perk. So I think any perk which is very, very niche like this for like a very certain class of heroes, watch this space, because I think the hero bans could hit this as well. So why would you take that perk? You might be able to take the other perk and just take the ban instead. His other minor is heavy landing, and I actually think this is a pretty strong perk, to be honest with you. During Primal Rage, jump packs damage and area increase by up to 75% while airborne. It kind of removes the power of Primal Rage, like the best monkey plays. And I will say, Primal Rage is one of the highest skill abilities in Overwatch. Like, the top end Winstons basically turn Primal Rage into like a Dragon Blade. It's so unbelievably strong in the right hands. For the lesser people, it's not quite as strong, but it's still nice as, like, at the very least, a survival tool. And even, like, the worst Winstons can normally get a juggle for 1 kill or something. Eventually you can pin someone up against the corner. This changes like your power from your punches and your juggling into your butt slams instead, which is kind of an interesting idea. Because that's also moving you from single target damage into AoE damage. So potentially if you're going into a comp which was a bit more like enclosed together and you really wanted to cleave more than the splitting someone off and punching them into a corner, like maybe they've got so much sustain that you can't possibly, and single target sustain that you can't possibly kill a guy if you juggle them. Maybe you take the butt slam ability instead and you just keep jumping up into the air as far as you can to get increased airborne time, and you land back down and you're doing some pretty big ass damage. So I see a world, and again, it'd be really interesting to see what really good Winston players do with this. Maybe actually have some sort of like different way of juggling where it's like less short leaps and more long looping leaps with like a smash, long loop smash. I don't know, and in between. So there's a lot of skill expression in this. So I actually quite like the ability. I give it 4 stars in design and 3 stars in quality. I'm actually not sure the situations where it's actually going to be useful are useful versus just isolating someone from the pack and then killing them. His mages then are Chain Lightning. Fully charged secondary fire hits bounce up to 2 additional targets. Okay, is what I'll say about this. There's something that makes me feel a bit uneasy about it, because his left fire is really cleave, right? And his right click becomes cleave with this. It is different ranges, obviously. This Chain Lightning becomes range cleave, whereas he normally has short range cleave with the primary fire of the Tesla cannon. It just makes me think, would you ever left click after this? And I assume you would still do, but because I think the DPS would be, actually it probably depends. I think the DPS maybe is higher if you're in like a big group of people versus like, you know, a big group of people trying to secondary fire and charging up, because it's a pretty long charge time, and it is a fully charged one that does this, not anything less than that. So maybe there is some merit into this. Maybe you can do situations where you fully charge a secondary fire shot, you hit like a Widowmaker or something, and it bounces to the Mercy behind, and then you use that moment to dive and kill the Mercy rather than the Widow. So there is some merit to this. I think there are some reasons to take it. I think it could be pretty obnoxious. But yeah, there's definitely some situations where you would want this versus not wanting it. I've given it 3 stars in design. I sort of sat in the middle. I think it's just a strong ability. It's one of those things where, again, I felt like it was a bit more of it just like, I'm just buffing Winston rather than hitting a certain matchup. And I think quality-wise, it's probably 3 stars as well. I don't think it really pushes Winston any more forwards than he is now, which is a reasonable state right now, is what I'll say about him. And I think it keeps him there. His final one is Revitalizing Barrier. Barrier projector heals allies within for 30 health per second. I think this low-key is potentially an extremely, extremely strong ability. I think people are underestimating it because the Chain Lightning one is just so much more fun, like, conceptually, that they don't really see the big picture. And actually, I quite like the idea of the Revitalizing Barrier, because one of the big things that people always, like, you know, they put it up against Winston versus playing like D.Va, for example, is that Winston can't easily peel his backline, which is somewhat true. You can always jump on the backline and put a bubble on them, but like it feels really shit for Winston to be doing that versus D.Va just DMing your backline instead of peeling back onto it. It always felt a bit more natural for D.Va because you get DM charge back up faster than Winston will get his bubble back up. It's like, it's a toggleable versus an ability that you use it and then lose it. With this Revitalizing Barrier, the ability to peel with your bubble becomes way more viable. The healing is more likely to keep people alive. It'll still feel pretty shit for Winston to do this, but it is an option. What I think is really strong about it, though, by the way, is not that type of thing, which you could do now. But if you just drop this in the middle of an opposing team on a dive, you could do some really disgusting dives. Like, you could dive pretty aggressively with this barrier. As on the leap, you would take a bit of damage normally as Winston. Like, you get, you know, headshot from Widow or something, or, you know, a bit of poke from Anna. And then you'd land, and by the time you're doing cleaving, you're already below half health. You put your bubble down now, you get the bubble protection, and also you're starting to heal back up all that chip damage you took during the dive, which means you're more likely to live for when your leap comes back up again, to leap out again to reset the dive. Also, and I think people, like, again, aren't super, like, respecting this enough, your flankers can use this barrier. Like, a Sombra, for example, might, you know, hack you, jump on the target, Sombra gets into the barrier, and then she's unkillable in this barrier as well. It's really going to make your opponent have to be like, holy shit, we have to break this barrier. Like, we can't leave it up. It is so, so scary to leave this barrier up. So yeah, I kind of like it. I think this could be really, really impressive, though. Anyway, I've given it 4-star design. I think this is the first thing I've given. I think it's 5-star quality. I can actually see this being extremely strong for Winston and dive-based comps, especially if you're like all in the dive. Genji, Sombra's, Tracer's playing in this bubble with the Winston. And again, by playing in it, I don't mean just all standing cuddled together, like I just mean like, you know, a Tracer might blink into it for a moment and get that 30 extra health to give her enough health to go get to another target. The Sombra might be just translocates into it to get a bit more health as well. It's just something they can situationally go back to for some survivability. And it gives your opponent something they absolutely have to kill now. So yeah, I think it's a really scary ability. Overall, though, I've given Winston a C. I think it's actually pretty strong if you look at the entire kit. But because I've kind of under-egged Chain Lightning, I've under-egged it. I think Chain Lightning's a bit weak on the design point, so it pulls it down a bit, and it's a major perk. So I've put him in the C tier, but it's kind of C+ tier. Wrecking Ball. Yeah, Steamroller. Roll impacts deal 100% more damage to tanks. This is kind of poo. No offense to Wrecking Ball and Wrecking Ball enjoyers, because I am a Wrecking Ball enjoyer. It basically turns your 60 damage roll over damage. I don't know what it's called actually, the roll impact damage. It turns it from 60 to 120 versus tanks. The problem is there's only one tank on the opposing team. Now, I will say this is one of the few things I'm going to really mention at this point, because I'm really dealing with quality and design in the situation of the base game's competitive game mode, right? Which is 5v5. In open queue, suddenly something like Steamroller becomes way, way more viable. And maybe you're happy with the perks doing that. Maybe it's fine that perks can do that, but I'm not sure the perk should be balanced towards roll queue, or open queue as well, unless the game state is going towards open queue, long run as the competitive game mode. But anyway, in open queue, this is actually a much better ability because you can go up against more than one tank, which means you're doing more than just 60 to 120 damage, which is like, your minor perk is giving you 60 extra damage on a hero that, to be honest with you, probably doesn't care about taking the additional 60 damage from Wrecking Ball versus Wrecking Ball just playing Batman-style Wrecking Ball where he just hangs from the rafters and slams on a squishy and just kills them like a fucking little hamster assassin. Anyway, overall, I think this is a pretty weak design. I've given it 2 stars design and 2 stars quality. Situationally, maybe it can be useful, but again, I thought the situations would be only in open queue, really, that it matters. Then the other minor is Pack Rat, and low-key this might be actually just busted. I'm kind of surprised this is a minor ability. Health packs heal an additional 100 health. The reason I say this is quite disgusting is Wrecking Balls already basically play around health packs, right? They do their combo, they do the slam, they do some shooting, they might even do the Junbin like tech or whatever you want to call it. Well, it's not really tech, it's just playstyle where he does this big looping swing into the air so that he can shoot mid-air, then slam at the end of the shot as well to get like both the damage up, and then when he's, you know, on the ground, finishes his clip into that target and then just rolls away and gets a health pack. Basically, Wrecking Ball could be somewhat self-sufficient already for most maps, just going around taking megas. He's going to be even more self-sufficient now if he gets 100 extra health on each health pack. There was like some degree of annoyance with Wrecking Ball. If you took enough poke damage, it's kind of like I always said this like was the big help to Wrecking Ball, even more than just CC, which is obviously really bad for Wrecking Ball to just get around the map hacking them. But if you can just poke him for enough damage and don't chase him, just keep poking him, eventually he would run out of resources. Eventually, the health packs wouldn't be enough for him to get back into battle again at full health, and he would eventually die on one of these rotations. Now he probably could just stay at full health, so I think low-key this is a disgustingly strong ability. And also, I don't think it changes his playstyle at all. I think this is just a straight buff to Wrecking Ball without any thought in the process. So I've given this one design 2 as well, and it was really generous. I probably should have given this 1, to be honest with you, because it really is just the same old Wrecking Ball. The only slight thing about the design is any map which had really poor health packs before, maybe this makes Wrecking Ball better on those maps because now the health pack is better, but it's such a minor fucking, like, deal. It probably should be 1-star design. I think I was generous, Wrecking Ball. I think it's 5-star quality, though. Wrecking Ball is, like, low-key kind of busted right now. He's really high skill cap. He can be easily shut down on ladder in very frustrating ways, but in a team-based environment, especially, like, at Overwatch Champion Series levels, he's a very, very strong hero. Like, he's almost like the Tracer of tanks. He's got an insane tempo. God, what a great word. He can always be doing something, basically, this hero. And I think this just means he's going to be always be doing something more than he was before. He's always going to be doing something now. Anyway, I think it's really strong for Wrecking Ball. I'm surprised it's a minor. Then his mages are hang time. Pile driver winds up longer, gaining air control and dealing up to 50% more damage. I've kind of softened on this one a little bit. When I first saw this, I thought this was just a nerf. There was absolutely no reason you would ever take this ability. I do think it is potentially in certain aspects a nerf. If you're a wrecking ball that likes to, you know, like roll around through people, annoy them, and then you do these big swings and you try and slam on people, and, you know, basically, if you're not trying to play this lurking I'm the bat type wrecking ball where you hang from the lofters, if you're always trying to be doing something on wrecking ball, this is actually probably a nerf to that play style, because people will be able to see you coming with the swing, they'll hear the sound cue for the slam, and because you're not going to be moving that much on the hang time, but you're going to be taking longer time to slam, people will be able to just walk away from your ability. So I think it's going to be really hard to slam people if they know that you're coming. That's already somewhat true anyway, but it's going to be especially true now. So I think it's pretty weak, this ability. Now, I say this, but the one situation where it's not going to be weak, and I think it's one of those situations where Wrecking Ball is actually kind of at its strongest, is where if he just hangs above like a choke point, which like the opposing team almost has to come through, he can always do this now, and basically doesn't care about the air control. People can't see him coming, and they probably can't react fast enough to hear the cue, the long charge up, and then slam. So it'll just do more damage onto a group of people walking through a choke. So I actually can see that playstyle of Hammond being even stronger with this. Anyway, I've only given it a design score. I think it's like one of the only heroes I didn't give a quality score to, because I think you really, really need to see the numbers and actually just feel the ability to know how good this is going to be from a quality standpoint. Because it does say here, winds up longer, but doesn't give any numbers. Is that 2 seconds? Is it 5 seconds? Is it 0.25 seconds? And also the air control. I saw it on some of the test streams, or the early streams, and you do move slow in the air. Like, it's slower than walking speed, but maybe they were inting, I don't know. Maybe it is faster than I think it is. Either way, I want to see the actual numbers and feel how this works, but I suspect it's good if you play Batman, Wrecking Ball, but otherwise it's pretty weak. Transfer efficiency. Reactivating adaptive shield reduces its cooldowns by 1.5 seconds per ally affected, and ally health gained is increased by 33%. Okay, this is a buff to the ability that was added recently to Wrecking Ball that I think everyone low-key at first thought was like completely garbage, but at the highest level I think people are now respecting the ability. And it was basically that Wrecking Ball would use adaptive shields on opponents and then try and use that adaptive shields in battle and leverage it to do more damage and have more survivability in general. They gave Ball the ability to, you know, not be selfish and actually play with the team. He could roll back into his team and transfer those shields back to his allies. And the trade was actually favourable for your allies, or I mean, just in general, because any 50 health from Ball would turn into 75 health to the ally. So you got a bit of a up on the trade as well. Now with this, the transfer efficiency, you're going to be, instead of just giving 50 health, giving them 75 health and losing 50 health yourself, for every 50 health you give, you give up, you give them 100 health instead. That's the 33% increase. Also, if you're doing this to a big group of people, it reduces the cooldown by 1.5 seconds until you can reuse it per ally. So you're going to be able to hit 4 allies with this. That's the max, right? Assuming we're not playing 6v6, which means you could take this down by 6 seconds. The cooldown, I think I've got it noted here, is normally 15 seconds. So if you can hit 4 people in the enemy team, roll back into your team with enough health left to transfer it over, you could then, 9 seconds after the fact of getting the adaptive shields, use it again. So it basically up pretty quickly. So it kind of rewards this ping-pong playstyle of Wrecking Ball where you're in their team, you're in your team, you're in their team, you're in your team. So it's actually kind of interesting. I think low-key, again, in a competitive environment, this could be extremely strong, but just playing ladder play, it'd be quite hard to use it, I imagine. Anyway, from a design standpoint, I think it's pretty cool. It just changed the way you'd play the Wrecking Ball. It's a bit of a less selfish playstyle, a bit more of a team-building playstyle, so I gave it 4 stars and 3 stars in the quality. I think it might be quite hard to use, to be honest with you, but maybe I'm actually underestimating this. Maybe this is actually pretty strong, even just for the additional amount of health you give. The second part of this might be just strong enough, the increase by 33% part. Overall, I gave him a C as well. Zarya. This is the last of the tanks. Zarya has jump ups, secondary fire, knockback, jump up. Secondary fire self knockback is increased by 75%. Basically, if you right click the ground, which Zaryas do sometimes, in case you're wondering why they do it, it gives you a little bit of a boost forwards and also can give you a boost up if you're very like skilled with how you jump. Now you get even more boost on it. It basically is giving Zarya mobility at the cost of taking a bit damage, because you do take some splash damage from your right clicks. I think that's a good decision. Zarya had a big weakness right now. She's only really good on flat maps, and even then she's like situationally good. She couldn't get onto the high grounds to follow people up. Actually, I'm being a bit over... I'm just like going over things a bit too quickly here. She wasn't bad on not flat maps, but she felt a bit boring on flat maps. Let's put it that way. She was only ever really being useful to bubble bubble people into opposing teams, and that person then becomes kind of like a pseudo tank that just goes in this unstoppable juggernaut for X number of seconds while they have the bubble and put enough pressure. Like classically, since Overwatch 2 came out, Zarya has seen a lot of play with Reaper. You bubble the Reaper as he TPs, and the opposing team can't deal with it, and this guy is so scary when he's in your face with a bubble. Can't be CC'd, can't be killed, can't really be given the fuck off, so he's a really scary prospect to do that to. So she's okay on, like, you know, maps like King's Row, for example, because people could get onto those high grounds for her. But as Zarya, you were always just like, you know, a bit of the bridesmaid in the comp. You were just stood there with like your supports going like, oh, gee, I hope someone comes near me so I can shoot them. Now Zarya can be a bit more of the, you know, the bride instead, rather than the bridesmaid, and actually get onto the high ground and start contesting people as well. So I quite like this change. I assume as well the secondary knockback is, again, it's not going to be enough to propel her from the ground full of Gibraltar up onto the ship. So it's going to be like not super high ground. It's going to be like middling stuff. Again, like King's Row. So I quite like it. It's interesting. 4-star design and 3-star quality. I think we also saw this in an April Fool's patch, and I think generally speaking, almost everyone said this was a cool thing, because you could also do stuff like where you would launch a right click into the air and then time it so that you got hit by that right click and then right clicked again in the air. And this could give you even more vertical mobility, or you could put it against a wall and go vertical and then horizontal. So there's some really cool stuff you could potentially do with this. So I'm looking forward to seeing what really good Zarya players do with a bit more mobility. There's then Gravitation Crush. Graviton Surge deals up to 30% of enemy max health as damage over time. I think this one's a bit boring, but again, it's one of those things where I think this is a bit more focused towards maybe even open queue. It's really good against heroes with lots of health, and heroes that have lots of health are normally tanks. So I feel like this is a pretty big buff to any comp that was particularly tanky. But obviously in 5v5, you're only ever going to go up against one tank, so it's almost like a just straight buff up to Grav. It's pretty minor, I think, as a change. So I'm not sure about it. I've given it 2 stars again because of some situational open queue use. But quality-wise, I think it's pretty weak, to be honest with you. It's not bad, but I think you'd want the mobility for the most part. For the major quirks, we have Energy Lance. Particle Cannon's beam pierces enemies well over 50%. That's actually pretty spookerific. If you grav people, normally what you do into the grav is you right-click and sometimes melee into gravs. And the reason for that is your primary fire doesn't pierce enemies. So if you graft and just use your left-click, you could probably only kill one person in the grav. Like, you might not be able to hit the person you want to because bodies are in the way. If you right-click though and melee, they're all like localized like AoE damage, and you could hit everyone and potentially kill everyone in a Graviton Surge. Now with Energy Lance, if you can build up the energy amount that are required, if you Graviton Surge like 3 or 4 people, Zarya could kill them on her own with just a left click, because that's way more DPS than right-clicking into the grav. So I think it makes Zarya, pardon me, a little bit more self-sufficient on getting kills through grav. Also, just beyond the selfish aspect of it, into comps that want to play close together, it's actually a pretty good take, again, for the design choice, because you might be able to hit, like, you might be trying to beam a support in the back line, and you're angling yourself so you're hitting, like, a DPS in the mid line instead, so you're getting, like, double value on your beam, so it rewards you for aiming and moving in particular ways, so I think it's an okay design choice. I've kind of given it 3 and 3 again. The problem with the quality, again, is that not many people are playing these close together comps, so I struggled also to see how, generally speaking, this is going to improve Zarya considerably. Final one is Spotter. And again, I think this is one of these abilities getting, like, really low-key underestimated. Projected Barrier activates ally health regeneration and increases their movement speed by 15%. This is super scary in a competitive environment, especially if you're communicating with your team. Which you should be, I imagine. Pardon me. I talked about earlier that she's got a really good interaction with Reaper, that Reaper just TPs in and you give him a bubble and he goes off and does it. Imagine giving Reaper the bubble and he gets a 15% movement speed. You can't get away from this guy. He's so hard to peel at this point, so it's really fucking scary. Imagine a Genji goes in, he dashes, he uses deflect, and then you bubble him after the fact, and he can move and chase someone down. Also, his regeneration starts and he starts healing again. It's 10 plus 5% of his max health, I think, is the regeneration, so it's not that big per second. But it's pretty noticeable, right? If someone is just chasing you down. So again, I think you could really enable these really scary heroes with the Zarya. It, again, leans more into this playstyle thing of the good version of Zarya right now, which is just enabling your teammates, so... But I think this is maybe the optimal way to play Zarya, so because of this, I've actually given it 5 stars in design and 4 stars in quality. I think it's really good. I think it's a good design in the sense that it's worked in situations where you have certain key heroes, it really promotes this playstyle, but it can somewhat be shut down by, like, super mobile enemy support lines where they can just disengage immediately as soon as someone, like, gets the spotter bubble, they just delta split, and you sort of waste the ability. So I think there are some situations where the spot is going to be really good, some situations where it's going to be really bad, so I like it. I think the kit's really well designed for the perks. As a result, I've given it a B. I'm also just going to pause for a moment because I desperately need water and to blow my nose, so YouTube, give me a second.